Thank you for listening to this message from Northwest Hills Community Church in Corvallis, Oregon. You can learn more about our church at nwhills.com. Today, lead pastor Josh Carstensen continues a series on the life of Peter. Have you ever gone through a season in your life where you thought about walking away from your faith? It typically happens because of two primary reasons. And there's a moment in Peter's life when things get tough, and Peter doesn't just walk away, but he runs away. It's a moment of sifting for Peter. What do you do in these moments of sifting? Also, as part of the Something to Say series, we'll start the message with someone's testimony. We hope you find it encouraging. Now, here's that testimony.
Good morning. My name is Catherine Inman, and I've been going to this church off and on since 1979. I grew up in a Methodist church. I went to camp in the summertime, and I was asked to give my life to Jesus if I wanted to, and so I went out to the field and I gave my life to Jesus. But when I got home, it was like nothing had really happened because I didn't really know about having a personal relationship. So I went on to college, really wasn't real active in going to church at that time, and so when I graduated from college and met my husband, I really didn't even think about talking to him about spiritual things. And so we got married and found out later that he did not want spiritual things in our home. It was about 9 years later when our first child was born, that I wanted to help him to have a spiritual background. And so I talked with a friend who shared with several of us the gospel message. And so at that point, I recommitted my life to the Lord because I felt like I hadn't been walking with Him. And so I started mentoring with someone from here, from Northwest Hills, and I was baptized in 1979 here. And I was like a sponge, and I wanted to learn all about God. And so I spread my Bibles on the table and had a concordance, and my husband Rod came home and found me doing that. I could tell he wasn't very happy, but it was a couple weeks later that he confronted me and he said, "Catherine, you're a Jesus freak, and I don't want to be married to you any longer." And that was just really a hard time for me. I didn't know what to say to him, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't go to bed that night. I stayed in a hanging chair that we had, and I just said, "Jesus, help me." I didn't know what else to say. I didn't know what to do. And the next morning, he woke up and he came out and he put his arms around me and he said, "Catherine, we're going to get through this." I knew that God had really worked a miracle in my life. So then I continued to study and to pray, but I just was very careful that I hid it from Rod. I didn't go to church, and so it was later that I realized after 35 years of marriage that I didn't like being married to someone who didn't love the Lord. The spiritual wall between us was just too high, and so I went to a Christian counselor and I said, "I want to have a ministry and I can't do it. I want to get a divorce. Will you help me?" And she said, "I can't help you with the divorce, but I will help you to look at a ministry of working with Rod, having Rod as your ministry." And I wasn't sure exactly how to do it, but I stayed with her and we worked through it, and I started paying more attention to Rod and gave him just a lot more attention, paying attention to his needs and what he needed from me as his wife. I really worked hard. It was hard work, but I realized that God was helping us, and our marriage was improving and was getting better and better. And I can say that those last 5 years of our lives, our marriage together, were the best of our marriage. I know that there are people who are living with non-Christians. Know that God will work with you and He will help you. I am so grateful to God for what He's done in my life, for giving me the additional wonderful years with my husband, and for then just helping me to grow in Him and to be able to serve Him now. I just thank you. He is an awesome God, and I'm very grateful.
My name is Josh Carstensen, the lead pastor here. I'm just going to start out with a quick question. How many of you, and you don't have to raise your hand, who are Christians, have ever thought about walking away from your faith? Yeah, certainly. And if you have gone through a season where you have walked away from your faith, how many of you have come back? You know, if you've been following for Jesus for a long time, there are moments where some of us have walked away and have come back, and some of us are here, and man, by God's grace, like we have been faithful, and there's never really been a strong pull to walk away from the Lord, and we've been consistent and steady and faithful. And if that's you, praise God, right? Like, yes and amen. That's the story that we want for all of our kids, right? We want a steady faith. But if that is you, you certainly ought to know people who have been in that category. Right? If you don't, I would recommend getting to know more people, because a lot of people have, right? Or get to know more people in a church, because a lot of people who call a church home and who are invested and who love Jesus at one point in their life will find themselves not as, let's just say, engaged as they once were. Right? What about if you're here and you're trying to figure out what you believe about Christianity, and you're trying to figure out, is Jesus worth following? And you've seen people who at one point in their life, they heralded the name of Jesus as if like everyone needs to do this, almost slightly judgmentally to you. And then you've seen them walk away from their faith, and you're going like, well, that doesn't seem super consistent. Why would I give my life to this if you walked away from something that you thought was so important? Right? All of us have seen people like that, most likely at some point or another. Right? Walking away from your faith is nothing new. Walking away from following Jesus is something that people have been doing for thousands of years. And people have been quitting the church for thousands of years. I'm reading a book right now called The Great De-Churching, and we are currently in the middle of the greatest exodus from the church in American history. Over the last 25 years, we've lost some 40 million people. People who once went to church at least one Sunday per month are now going less than one Sunday per year. And that is that's the largest demographic shift in church attendance in our 250-year history. Right? There's a big shift in the Great Awakenings. There's a big shift after the Civil War. But those were all towards like church attendance. And now it's like people are walking away. And when it comes to walking away from the church, I recognize that doesn't necessarily mean that you're walking away from your faith. A lot of people who don't go to church, who did, still call themselves believers. However, at best, you're certainly missing out on the life that Jesus invites us into, namely obedience to Him, which really does lead to joy when He says, if you love me, you will love my people. And that whole obedience piece really is something that is important to us. And Jesus' plan for the world is to reach the world through the local church. And when we divorce ourselves from that, we're certainly divorcing ourselves from God's heart for what He has for us. So people leave all the time. I experience this a lot as a pastor. You know, we're a larger church in a small town, and so there is not a month that goes by where I don't meet someone somewhere. I hope it's not one of you in the future, but where I meet someone that used to go to our church, that doesn't go to another church, but they're just out. And it's an awkward conversation every time. And every time I'm torn between wanting to, first of all, like my mind is going, hey, it's not worth the exchange. Like what you think that you are getting with a half a day on Sunday is not worth the exchange. Like that's where my heart goes. And I want to say, what in the world are you doing But I don't want to come across as judgmental because I'm not trying to be. It's not like you should be in church. We could really use your tithing money. Like, that's not where I'm coming from. My heart literally is for them. So I don't want to make people feel like this kind of shame moment. So I'm always torn with whether I say something or not, right? So you start with the small talk of like, hey, how's life? How's your kids? But you kind of want to say something, but you kind of don't. And it's hard. You kind of want to end with, man, I miss you. Like I do, but there's this tension and it happens a lot. But I'll just say, like, if you're ever thinking about it, I'm telling you, it's not worth the exchange. Today we're going to see in the life of Peter. We've been studying Peter for, I believe this is week 6. We're going to see a moment where he walks away from his faith. And I mean that in a strong way, and I'm going to qualify that statement here in a little bit. But he certainly walks away from following Jesus with the expectations that he had not being met. And it's a powerful moment. It's a painful moment. It's a very real moment for most of us. And so we're going to look at what does it look like to walk away from our faith today? What did it look like for Peter? What's the temptation for us to walk away from faith and the church? And again, I know those two aren't exactly the same, but they're similar. So before we get into Peter's story, the Bible and our experience tells us there's primarily 2 reasons why people walk away from their faith. And they're wildly separate from each other. They're on polar opposite ends of the spectrum as to why. And I've talked about this many, many times before, but people often will walk away from their faith either when A, life is really good and you have everything that you want, or B, when life is really hard and things are miserable. Right? And so on the one hand, Jesus makes it very clear in Matthew 16, I believe it's 16, Matthew 19, sorry. He says, it's hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. I tell you, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And newsflash, we are rich. Like, we live with abundance, like beyond abundance compared to anyone in the history of the world. We have everything, which means, man, it's easy for us to walk away, right? It's easy for the believer in America to not have that sense of, I need God, and I've got everything that I need at my fingertips. Therefore, I'm just going to passively or actively walk away because my weekends are far more entertaining when I can do whatever I want rather than commit to something that takes effort. Right? And that same story is true throughout the week. It's true with following Jesus. And so when life's really good, the tendency is to either actively or passively just drift away. And then on the other hand, right, a primary reason why people walk away from their faith is when their faith is not what they thought it would be. Right? When becoming a follower of Jesus, we have this picture in our mind of when I become a follower of Jesus, my life is going to look a certain way. And when it doesn't look that way, and when we get disillusioned, when we get discouraged, when something really bad happens, it's easy to walk away, right? Like I knew a family who, young family in their 20s, were on their way to the mission field, literally in a car going to the airport to fly out of the country, get in a head-on car wreck. Mom and daughter are dead on the street. And you get this moment where you're going, God, wow. Like I thought I was doing what you wanted me to do. Like, are you good? Are you real? Is this worth it? Like, and you extrapolate that story into all of our stories, right? Because we all have them either now or in the future. There are moments that we're going to see in Peter's life today where we will be sifted. Right, where our life will be shaken, where the foundation that we thought we were standing on is going to be pulled out from underneath us. And in that moment, we have a decision. What am I going to do with my life? And we're going to see Peter, in his decision, he decides to run. So what happens to Peter? Some of you know this story well. Some of you, it's newer. And both of those realities make me happy. I'm happy that there are people who know this story well. And I'm happy that for some of you, you'll be hearing this for the first time. But as Peter is discovering who Jesus is, we're meeting this moment right before Jesus is crucified. In this moment, there is a ton of anticipation for what is about to happen. This is the week before, and this great Palm Sunday moment. This nation is in a frenzy. You've got the national flag being waved, the palm branch, they're laying it down, and everyone's hoping and expecting that Jesus is now going to do something for us that we've been longing for 900 years. Right? Some of you know the story. For 900 years, this nation has been under oppression, under angst, under slavery, under hardship beyond hardship. Right? Starting with civil war, right? After David, after Solomon, the nation's in civil war, followed by Assyrian invasion, followed by Babylonian invasion. And this is an invasion of the sorts where your capital city is besieged for 18 months and most people starve to death. We have stories in the Bible of people eating their own children because there's no food. Right? And that's the culture, that's the season that these people are in, and most die of starvation, and some escape. And by escape, we mean some are taken away in chains 900 miles away to Babylon. Eventually, a new army comes in, right? The Persians. They're a little bit more religiously pluralistic, and they let the Jews go back and rebuild. But then another nation comes in under Alexander the Great, the Greeks, and through this whole process of Hellenization, the Greeks, they want to make everyone the same. And so you being distinctively Hebrew is a problem in this world. And so they make it a capital offense to practice Sabbath, to practice worship the way that they wanted to. And they're living under this angst of someone saying, you cannot live the life that you want to live. You have to succumb to our power, to our authority, right? And then after that, we know what happens. Rome comes in, and Rome's the power of the day when Jesus is there. And imagine this. You're Jesus. You're in your high school class, and you're looking to your left, and you're looking to your right, and there are no boys in your class, right? And there are no boys in the class above you. And there's probably no boys in the class behind you. Why? Because your king had all the boys in your city killed. Right? And so imagine that culture. Imagine just what it's like to grow up in a city, in a nation where you have this oppressive government who's saying, hey, we're going to kill all these baby boys. We're going to take your idealized form of worship in the temple, and we're going to smash it together with Roman rule. Right? And you remember Roman rule, right? Roman rule, they came in and under Herod, they're rebuilding the temple because they're trying to appease the Jews, and they rebuild it massively. Right? You've got this rebuilding over 46 years. They say 10,000 hired craftsmen, and they rebuild the temple. Solomon's second temple, they rebuild it, but in the rebuilding, again, they smash together Roman rule with Jewish worship. And Jews, all they want to do is be able to worship, but they have an oppressive government above them. And so when Jesus comes in, not only when he comes in, you know what he does first thing when they're waving these palm branches and they're laying it down? He goes to the temple and he clears it out. Right? So it's like we're really, really, really excited. And guess who else is really, really, really excited? Our boy Peter. Right? This is the moment. Like, I long for this moment. Right? This is the height of the heights. This is for us when following Jesus is like, this is so good. Right? Maybe you became a believer in college and it's like, I'm part of a college ministry and I finally have people who know me and I've got a purpose and I've got friends and things are great. Right? Maybe you became a believer later on and you have a place for your family now and now my kids are in youth group and they can finally have friends after COVID's over and life is good and things are really, really great. It's like things are really great. Then things get really hard. And for Peter, his foundation is absolutely shaken. Jesus tries to warn him multiple times. Jesus tries to say, hey, Peter, like, I know that you think that I'm going to do something for you, but it's not going to happen. And Peter never gets it until this moment today. A couple weeks ago in Matthew 16, for the first time, we saw these words about Peter's anticipation of what would happen. This is Matthew 16, verse 21. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the third day be raised. Right? And how does Peter respond? Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you. Okay, first of all, the whole authority thing, like there's an issue going on here. Jesus is like, no, Peter, I'm about to die. And Peter's like, nope. And why does he say no? He says no because he doesn't want it to be true. I don't want you to die, because if you die, that means like we're not going to conquer the Romans. This is going to be a problem. Peter does not want the future that Jesus says is going to happen. Peter gets rebuked by Jesus, pretty harsh. Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan." Not exactly the words that you want to hear from Jesus. And then he invites him to something significant. He says, if you want to follow me, following me is going to be a lot different than what you thought. You thought you were going to get accolade. You thought you were going to get prominence. You thought you were going to get leadership. You thought you were going to get authority. I'm going to give you the opportunity to follow me and to take your cross and to live in absolute submission to other people. And Peter's like, nah, I like the authority. I don't want you to die. I'm far more into what I get out of this. We see that this continues over and over, and we see that Peter doesn't get it. We see this multiple times. This is a couple weeks before, or a couple days before this moment in Palm Sunday, when Jesus is about to ride in. He tells them again, I'm about to die. This is Matthew 26, starting in verse 1. When Jesus had finished all these sayings, he said to his disciples, "You know that after 2 days the Passover is coming." Sorry, this is after these moments. "And the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified." So he's promising Peter again, no, I'm going to be crucified. And immediately after this, we recognize that Peter still doesn't get it, because the conversation that Peter initiates is, hey, which one of us disciples is going to be the best? And you got to believe Jesus is just going, are you kidding me? Like, I just told you that I'm going to be handed over to the Romans to be killed. And Peter's like, nope, don't believe it, don't want to believe it. I'm going to be your right-hand guy. Life's going to be great. The story continues. And Jesus says, ultimately, Peter, you're not going to get what you think you want. And you're going to walk away. And it's going to be really painful. So let's read along, or listen up. This is Luke 22. Starting in verse 31. I'm bouncing around today. I got a bunch of different passages. I think different gospel writers kind of capture this more effectively than others, kind of stringing together the whole story. So I'll be between Luke, Matthew, and John today. So this is Luke 22, starting verse 31. Jesus says, "Simon, Simon," which is a problem. Anytime he's referring to your pre-Christian name, like, it's always a problem. And if you notice in the life of Peter, I could be wrong, and someone please tell me if I am. I think unilaterally every single time that the name Simon is mentioned, it's when he has a lack of faith, right? And every time Peter is mentioned, like he's doing pretty good. But Jesus says, "Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demanded to have you that he might sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned again, strengthen your brothers." Okay, let's let that sit in for a second. These are not great words to hear from Jesus. They're painful. They're bizarre in some ways, because here's Jesus saying, hey, Simon, Peter, Satan wants to sift you all. In that all, he's saying you there, that's a plural you. He's referring to all the disciples. He's saying there's about to be something that's going to happen to all of you that is going to absolutely, utterly destroy your world. But I'm praying for you, that's a singular you, Peter, that when this moment happens and you are going to leave, you will walk away. And we know that because he says, when you return, so that returning infers that there is a departure. When you return, I want you to strengthen the brothers. I want you to strengthen these people around you. But the idea that Satan, the enemy of God, is going to sift his people, that's a really troubling thought. It's a painful thought, right? It's a thought that is very likely to happen with many of us when things are going well, right? When life's really good, and it's going to hit us differently, whatever that sifting is. For Peter, it was an absolute taking away of what he thought Jesus would do for him, right? For us, maybe it's a taking away of what we thought, the life that we wanted, right? For us, it may be, man, my church has really failed me, or my friends have really failed me, or I have failed myself. Like, sometimes that's the biggest disillusionment that there is. Is our own self-failures. And we have an enemy that when things are going well, wants to shut it all down. Right? That's really discouraging. It's discouraging that, man, when my faith is strong, right? When my faith is strong, hey, Jason, good to see you, buddy. When my faith is strong, there is an enemy that wants to take away what's going well. And this is the moment that we're going to see in Peter. And again, Peter's going to say, absolutely not. Listen to how Peter responds when Jesus says this sifting is going to happen. This is verse 33. Peter said to him, Lord, I am ready to go with you both to prison and to death. Jesus said, I tell you, Peter, the rooster will not crow this day until you deny three times that you know me. Again, kind of a weird spot. Jesus is like, hey, Satan's going to sift you. It's going to be painful. You're going to run away, but eventually you'll come back. And when you do, strengthen the brothers. And Peter says, nope, I'm going to death with you. I will do anything, but I will not deny you. The evening continues. Passover dinner has happened. Got to be an awkward dinner. I'm just saying. There's the moment where Jesus says, hey, Judas, you're going to betray me. Everyone else is, Judas? Okay, he gets up, he walks away. They leave the dinner setting and they go into the garden. And here Jesus again tells Peter, you're going to walk away from me. And we pick this up in Matthew 26, verse 30. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to him, you will all fall away because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee. Peter answered them, here's our boy Peter, although they all fall away because of you, I love that he puts everyone else down, I will never fall away. Jesus said to him, truly I tell you this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, even if I must die with you, I will not deny you. And all the disciples said the same. They're like, yeah. Peter's like, my faith's not going to be rocked. I'm with you. Right? And again, why? It's because he believes like this is going to be the season that we're taking down Rome. Like it's going to happen. I got my sword. I'm ready. Right? And then we get this whole scene, a real painful scene where Jesus is praying to the Father. He's in huge agony and pain. He knows what's about to happen as far as him getting arrested and crucified. And he asks Peter, James, and John specifically, hey, come with me over here. And I need you guys to be with me. I need you to be my close friends. I need you to pray for me. I need you to stay awake because I'm struggling. And the 3 disciples, they fall asleep. Jesus comes back and he's like, really? Like some friend you are, like I'm in my greatest moment of need and you're asleep. He comes back and he wakes him up the first time and they're like, okay, we can do it. We'll do it. We're a good friend. And they fall asleep again. And Jesus comes back again and he's just like, just this loving dad. Okay, I'm alone. I know I'm alone here. I'm going into my darkest hour of my life and I have no one. Even my own father is turning his back on me, is what it feels like. And then comes this moment, right? This is the moment where everything changes for Peter, and John captures it really well. This is John 18, starting in verse 2. Now, Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas, having procured a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, went there with lanterns and torches and weapons. So you got an army coming at Jesus. Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said to them, whom do you seek? They answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus said to them, I am he. Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground, right? This is the moment that Peter's like, okay, let's go. Like, we're going to take them on. Like, this is a great moment for Peter. You got this army coming after Jesus. Jesus is like, here I am. Everyone falls down. Peter's feeling pretty good in this moment. He grabs the sword. Things are great until they're not. Right? Just like our faith sometimes. Sometimes things are really great. Sometimes life is good. Sometimes we have all the things that we think we're going to get when we're following Jesus. Sometimes our families are great. Sometimes we have close friends. Sometimes we open up our Bibles and we read it and we get something out of it and we feel like, wow, I got something today. This is awesome. Then it falls apart. Verse 7. So he asked them again, whom do you seek? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I told you that I am he. So if you seek me, let these men go. This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken. Of these whom you gave me, I have lost not one. Then Simon Peter. I love that it's Simon Peter in this moment. It's kind of like pre-following Jesus moment and following Jesus moment. Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. So Jesus said to Peter, put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me? Wait, what? I thought we were going to take on Rome. I thought this was our moment. Right? I thought, Lord, that this was the life that you had for me. I thought things were looking good. Now you're telling me, complete 180. Everything that I was hoping for is now taken away from me. Right? And here, Peter's life comes crashing down. Matthew describes it as well. And he describes kind of Jesus where he's coming from in this act of surrender. This is in chapter 26, verse 52. Then Jesus said to him, put your sword back into its place. This is Jesus talking to Peter. For all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then should the scripture be fulfilled that it must be so? Then all the disciples left him and fled. Right? This is that moment that all the disciples are being sifted like wheat. They're being shaken. Right? Everything that they thought Jesus would do for them is now taken. And what does Peter do? He runs. And not only does he run, but now he's angry. I fully believe this. I believe he is fully angry. He wants nothing to do with Jesus, so much so that he denies even knowing him 3 separate times. Right? If you know the story, you know that he kind of follows behind at a distance when Jesus is arrested, and multiple people are asking him, don't you know Jesus? Aren't you a follower? Aren't you from Galilee? And he starts cussing people out like, no, I don't know him. I don't even know who that is. Again, because he wants something from Jesus that Jesus is not offering him. Listen to this translation from Luke 22, back to what Jesus said earlier. He said, Simon, Simon, watch out. Satan has asked to sift you, but I have prayed for you, that your faith may not utterly fail, and you, once you have returned to me, strengthen your brothers. Man, there's a lot of reasons to run away and be angry. All right, sometimes it's active. Sometimes we get that shaking and that disillusioned moment like Peter. Sometimes it's just passive. Sometimes it's just life just kind of goes a certain way and all of a sudden we're disengaged. Right? In the book, The Great Dechurching, the number one reason why most people leave church is simply because they've moved. And they just don't get into the rhythm again and they're detached and life just happens and life's good and they're detached. So sometimes we just kind of fall out of rhythm with the Lord. Sometimes it's on purpose. But here's where I want to land the plane. I want to land it in 2 ways. Number one, I want to say Jesus never quit Peter. Even though Peter walked away, Jesus says, hey, you're going to walk away, but I'm praying for you. And when I pray for you, that means you're going to come back. And he does. And we're going to hear about this story next week when Jesus reinstates Peter. But I also want to end thinking about this. The Christian life is a marathon. It really is not a sprint. And there will be seasons, I promise you, where we will be tempted to walk away for whatever reason. Right? Again, maybe it's on accident, maybe it's on purpose, maybe we're angry, maybe it's just we're distracted. And there are seasons where we will want to quit, right? That's what marathons are. You want to quit. I was talking to my friends Jesse and James last week, and they did a marathon for their 10th wedding anniversary on the Great Wall of China. And one of the sections of it, James was showing me a video that he took, is literally you're climbing up these stairs. And it's climbing. It's like ladder climbing. And he has this video of Jesse. You can laugh about it with Jesse. And it's like Jesse had been sick, super sick when she got there. We're doing it anyways. And she is step by step climbing this thing, and James, being James, is like, hey, let me get a video of you. And she's like, I hate you, James. And if that's not a picture of the Christian life at times, right? If that's not a picture, I don't know what is. But it's in those moments that we have to make a decision, right? Like, what am I going to do when my expectations of following Jesus, when they fail, when they're not what I thought they would be, what am I going to do? Jesus never fails us. Peter has a decision to make. We'll talk about it more next week because I need to pray and ask God to do what I can't. So, Father God, I thank you for this story. It's a sobering story. It's also a super real story. And I thank you that we're not alone. For those of us who've gone through seasons where we wonder, God, are you worth following? And maybe we've actively just made that decision. God, I'm angry at you. I experienced something that I cannot fathom that you could work through. And so I'm going to walk away. Or whether we just passively are just disengaged and we find ourselves in different rhythms in life. Lord, I pray that we would take a minute here and we would ponder. We would ponder what Peter eventually came to realize, that yes, you did not meet my expectations and conquer Rome, but ponder the fact that you conquered something so much greater than my simple-minded expectations. God, you conquered sin and death. And for us, when life doesn't go the way that we think it should, likely it's because you got a better plan. And that plan is not always simple to understand. And it's certainly not easy to climb up through. God, just like that marathon scene, God, sometimes that plan is brutal. But God, I thank you that in the midst of it all, you never leave us. That you are with us. That you are a good and kind God. We love you, Jesus. Amen. I love you guys.
Thanks for listening to today's teaching from Northwest Hills Community Church. We hope you find ways to apply the gospel to your life. And be sure to check out our website, nwhills.com, where you'll find ways to engage with us. And if you're able, we'd love to see you at church next Sunday. Thanks again for listening.